Dave, the start of the season, less than 2 weeks away now. It certainly does go quick. How do you feel preparations are going so far?
Preparations are going okay. I think when you come into pre-season, you certainly would like to have everything in place on day one, and notoriously that's never the case. And I still, absolutely know we've got work to do in lots and lots of different areas, which is fine. The tough thing for us, I suppose, this year was the quick turnaround. The gap we had between the end of the season and the start of pre-season was a short one. We had some players carrying niggles from that point, and that's carried over, if you like, a little bit. You then look at recruitment in terms of what that brings. We had different plans in terms of the two different divisions we could have been in. And I suppose we've still followed up wanting to bring in quality. And sometimes, regardless of how much pull you think you might have, if you're looking to potentially take players that we feel can grow with us from League 2 into League 1 and play in League 1, then there's the likelihood they could play in League 1 now, and we've lost out on some to League 1, which you would expect. So we have had to be patient within that. I still know for a fact there's opportunities for us to bring players in, and we'll look to do that. But we are, like I say, we are where we are. We've got to get through to the start of the season with everybody fit, raring to go. And ultimately, regardless of what you do, everything's targeted for the 5th of August and the home game against Gillingham.
Yeah, we'll come on to the transfer window in just a minute, but obviously the last 3 friendlies that you've got are obviously a step up in opposition. We saw that on Saturday, 3 championship sides coming to Edgeley Park. What are you hoping to get out of those games, really?
Minutes, absolutely. That's the most important thing. Obviously, huge challenges in terms of how you go about things. The ideal case for us would have been you build into next weekend with the ability for everybody to play 90 minutes and have 20 outfield players all fit and all available. And I think at that point we could be strong and a match in certain areas for what we're coming up against. Unfortunately, that's not the case with some injuries that we have got. And one thing we certainly won't do is risk anybody in those games that have any type of injury or knock or anything like that. Ultimately, the results aren't the most important thing. We still want to compete and be committed to what we're going to do. Friendlies are a little bit different because I suppose you can try things out knowing that the consequence isn't what it would be in a league game in terms of 3 points on offer. We'll go about it in different ways. So we still want to, although we're playing against championship opposition and have been, like I say, for the last three friendlies, if you like, last 2 weeks, we still want to try and be front foot. At times, that will mean that we'll get played around because we're playing against better players than we'll come up against week in, week out. But what we don't want to be is go into it and just contain and be a deep block for 90 minutes and not concede and not get anything out of the game in terms of what we can do in possession. So there's absolutely a balance. And hopefully we'll strike that, and regardless of what happens next weekend, we'll be in a better place going into the week prior to the season.
You can obviously take pre-season results with a pinch of salt, and that works both ways, positively and negatively. But one positive certainly has been that the form of Anthony Sarcevic in pre-season so far. Obviously had a really stop-start season last year because of injury, but performed really well in those playoff games, and he looks to have the bit between his teeth right now.
Yeah, listen, Sauce is a great player, one of our better players, and probably within the fan base, maybe divides opinion. I don't get that. Like I say, I see what he does day in, day out. He started last season brilliantly. The thing will always go on with Sauce, which probably does him no favours, it's just his body language. He's a winner. He's been successful at all the clubs he's been at and had multiple promotions. And he wants things to be going well and he wants to be successful. And when things aren't, he doesn't show that in a great way in terms of how he goes about things. But he started last season brilliantly in terms of goal return and was in a good place. He had a little bit of a dip, and that coincided with some injuries. And he was an important player for us. It was out at a key time. Thankfully, we got him back towards the back end of the season, but that coincided with other big players for us being out. So again, he's had a short turnaround. Missed some football. Obviously, came back in right at the end. Not 100% match fit. Managed to get good minutes in the semi-final and in the final. And we've got to make sure he's recovered now and, like I say, hits the ground running again, because he'll be a massively important player for us.
On the subject of injuries, I mean, I suppose at this time of year in particular, absence can sometimes lead to speculation with the transfer window open. We've not seen Will Collier yet in pre-season. Miles has been missing the last few weeks. Are you able to clear up their situation?
Yeah, two different situations. So Will, again, similarly had a hangover, if you like, from last season. We managed to include him in the playoff games and the game at Wembley, but he was nowhere near fit. We offloaded him through the summer, which was only a short period, 2 or 3 weeks. Came back in with a plan which realistically for Will, he's not trained for a long time. He came back in still with a little bit of discomfort with the injury he had. So we had to be careful with that. We gave him a little bit more time. It didn't really settle. So we went to see a specialist and we decided to get it injected. So we had an injection the day prior to, 2 or 3 days prior to us going to Spain. So we had that injection, was able to come away with us, and has been in around the group. Once that injection had happened, we had to give it 10 to 14 days with nothing really in terms of running. Thankfully now he's got over that and he's back on the grass. He's with Tom and Luke for the next couple of days. We're hopeful then he joins back in with the group in terms of full training on Thursday, and we may, all things being equal, get 45 minutes out of him in one of the games at the weekend, which will be great. But he's still at least a few weeks away, probably 2 or 3 weeks, maybe 3 or 4 weeks away from being 100% match fit. I've seen loads and loads of speculation. Again, a positive and a negative from my perspective as a coach is that there's been no interest in Will and no offers for Will. I know lots of people have said he's going here, there, and it's a done deal and all that type of things. There's been nothing, which is a great thing for the club and a great thing for us, but from a, like I say, a coaching management perspective, it is a bit of a disappointment, because we want our players to be doing well. If they're doing well, then there should be interest in them. And he was in a really good place. Again, even for him last season, a bit of a stop-start season, go right back to the concussion at Stevenage, and he had some issues, which meant that he wasn't at his best for the whole season, but there were still really, really good moments that happened that probably put him back in the spotlight, as it did at the back end of the National League season. So we hope when he is fully fit to get him back to that level, and being the energetic forward-running, goal-scoring midfielder that he has been for the last 18 months, and hopefully that will be the case. In terms of Miles, probably completely opposite. So Miles came back from being away on international duty, playing in a game for Grenada. Started pre-season, felt a little bit of pain around his knee, but nothing in terms of function stopping him anything. We knew we needed to be a little bit careful because he had a less break than anybody else. Came away with us, obviously played in games, trained all through pre-season. This little niggling pain wasn't going away, so Andy decided to just send him for a scan, really precautionary. And we found that it was a significant injury in his knee that wasn't stopping him functionally in terms of training. It was just a niggling little discomfort, but he's actually ruptured his LCL, which is the lateral ligament in his knee, 4 weeks prior while he was away with Grenada. So he saw a specialist. Again, decision to be made around surgery or injection, because there's been some healing taking place over that 4 weeks. Then decided to go with the injection, but he's going to be out for probably close to 12 weeks, 10-12 weeks, which means we won't see him certainly for the first part of the season, which is obviously disappointing. His performances last season were obviously great. The biggest thing with Miles is the the flexibility in terms of positions he can play and covering different positions for us, which when you're carrying probably lesser numbers becomes more damaging. But it is what it is. We have to, like I say, we have to deal with that and understand that he's not going to be back, certainly in the foreseeable future. But when he does, make sure he hits the ground running and has an impact on the squad.
In terms of the other long-term injury absences, obviously Wood's still recovering. I think you mentioned around October time when we spoke last, and Stretz was due to have surgery. What's the latest on those guys?
Yeah, Wood's great as can be. Frustrating for him, but as you'd expect, it's been fantastic. I suppose, listen, as a relatively young man still, he is like the model pro. So again, he does get over disappointments, and every single day is right at it. And you hope that gets rewarded in the fact that there aren't any setbacks in terms of his comeback. And the test for him will be when he is back on the grass and he is twisted and turning, how that feels. But at the minute, he's cracking on, working hard in the gym. He's able to get on the bike now. He's obviously off them crutches the day before we went away to Spain, which allowed him to come with us, which was really, really important. So we're still looking at end of September, start of October. If we've got him back by the middle of October, I'll be absolutely delighted, because that means things will have gone without setback, which will be the most important thing. Stretz is due for surgery start of August. So when he saw the specialist, there was significant swelling in there, and as they will with cruciates some of the time, well, quite a lot of the time, they'll try and get once the swelling's gone down, almost some prehab in there, so that when you are post-op, then you're a little bit ahead of the game. So he's in that phase at the moment, still in his brace. He'll have surgery in the next couple of weeks, but even then, it's season done for Jack. It's a case of him, I suppose, coming to terms with that, which he has, and then us all supporting him and making sure that you use this disappointment as motivation, and the pre-season of next summer ultimately becomes massively important for him to make sure he hits the ground running for the following season.
Those injuries have obviously left you a little bit depleted in certain areas, and there's obviously a lot of speculation around this time of year in terms of incomings, some credible, some not. I think you started the summer being linked with a move for Phil Jones, which probably gives you an idea of that. But when we spoke last, you talked about needing to be patient. Are we closer to bringing anyone in now?
We're definitely closer, and I would hope that by the end of the week there'll be at least one, maybe a couple in, which will be great. But with the targets we have in mind, we are maybe a little bit further down in the pecking order, and other clubs, be that in permanent or be that in loans, will be exploring, as players will, higher options to start with and see how things fall. So from a recruitment perspective, Simon, Smudge, Dale have lots and lots of plates spinning. Within that, we still have, again, budgetary requirements in terms of what we can do, and how that works. And it's not a sort of unlimited egg nest in terms of going and getting whoever we want at whatever price or whatever cost without things being balanced. So we've got to make sure that as much as there potentially will be incomings, then there might be outgoings as well, to sort of level that up, if you like. We are a little bit short on numbers. Like I say, we'd love to be in a position where we've got 20 first team outfield players and be able to play 2 10s or 2 11s this weekend that were both of equal strength, and could both give 2 championship clubs good games. We're probably going to be a little bit weaker, but like I say, that's a consequence of not wanting to risk anyone. And ultimately, the most important game, or the more important game, if you like, is the following weekend, and that certainly leads into a really, really busy August in terms of what games look like. And the first 3 months of the season are loaded with fixtures. So it's important that we have players available for those games, rather than just focusing on what next weekend brings.
We have seen plenty of trialists involved over pre-season as well, a couple over in Spain, a few more since we've got back. What, if anything, can you tell us about those guys? Yeah,
we obviously took some to Spain with us to have a look at. Since we've come back, Rowan McDonald's still in with us. Rowan's obviously come out of Man City this year. He's had a really bad couple of years with injuries, and we knew we had to be careful with him. Played in the 2 early pre-season games. did really, really well at Wolves on the back of the game over in Spain. But again, as you sort of hope doesn't happen, but you suspect may happen, as a little bit of a setback in terms of a little bit of a quad. So we've had to take him out of it, hence him not being involved since. We've still got some other trialists in. Again, I think there'll be speculation from the weekend around one of my former players playing in the game, which was the case. But we're just doing him, like I say, him a favour in terms of not being able to train, and someone I've got a lot of time for, a lot of respect for. So he's in with us, and we'll hopefully get him fit to allow him to get himself sorted for next season. There's obviously been some young lads involved. Obviously, it was announced yesterday around the emerging talent and Joe Monks' role. So there's been some younger players, some of which have been given contracts, but really are more looking towards the future rather than impact on the first team at the moment. And I think the amount of trialists we have in and look at, for us certainly will be, yes, we're having a look at players, but also we're, I suppose at the moment, trying to get bodies in order to fill games and make them games be competitive, and that will continue to be the case.
One player you have brought in has obviously been Nick Powell, joining from Stoke City. You've spoken before about sometimes finding players that are above the level, and he certainly fits that category, doesn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. You knew from well, listen, you knew before Nick coming into the building in terms of what he's done and what quality he has. When he does come in, you see that on a bird's eye view of that in terms of close up. And then he showed that in games. The important thing, like I say, for us is us building Nick up, and ultimately finding a role within our team that best suits him and gets the best out of him. Because if we can do that and we're successful in doing that, then we have a high caliber player at the top end of the pitch for us that you would hope would be absolutely have lots of goal involvement in goals and assists. That has to fit within a team structure, and we've still got to work on things, especially as you go up through the levels in terms of what you come up against, of how to best work that, and how to best get the players, I suppose, around him and fit within what we want from the game. So that will be a work in progress. But in terms of what he brings, I think it's everything we hoped it would be. And I think even the glimpses you see in the supporters have something to be really excited about.
And just finally to ask you about Saturday's game, obviously a special day for the club, 140th anniversary. I think players from every decade dating back to the 1960s coming along to the game as well. So that should be a great occasion for the club as well.
Absolutely. I think it's testament to what's happened since Mark came in and there was a change in ownership of the club. I think the club do it really well in terms of celebrating the past, and whether that be past achievements, past players, whatever it might be, ultimately that's important because it's what leaves the club in the place it is at the moment, and where the club sat within the not too distant past, if you like, is where we want to try and get back to, and that's a huge motivation. So again, I know speaking from experience that 20 years ago when I was at the club there was no 120th anniversary celebration, and I think that's something that the club does better than an awful lot. So it'll be, like I say, be great for the older players, shall we say, to be recognised. I'm sure for lots of supporters there are familiar faces and probably some unfamiliar faces. But it'll be, like I say, be a great day, and I imagine something that will continue for certainly the foreseeable future in terms of celebrating what happens. From a personal perspective, in terms of this squad, we want to make memories that hopefully bring the club forward, but again can replicate and get us back to where we were not too long ago.
Really appreciate your time, Dave. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.